Yes, happy Wednesday. We're gonna start this off as normal. 5 minutes, 4:05 or 7:05. 5 minutes after them, we're gonna start. Just hang out, settle in, have a good time. And at 4:05, we're gonna get right into it. I have a bunch of notes, some topics to talk about. Probably won't get to everything. Just to preface, though, we will be talking a lot about community. I know the past couple of weeks we've been on a Veblen binge, talking about real strict social theory, but we're going to bring it back to our grassroots, talk about community, the importance of community, talking about coalitions, but basically bringing the individual in to the scene amongst other individuals. So 4:05, hang out, chill out, and then we'll start.
And one thing I had an interesting like I never heard of these guys before. Like the situationalists, like this group in France that was trying to start some sort of like leftist movement, but got convoluted because they were trying to talk about like loops and how like things. So I was just wondering if anybody heard about them.
No, I don't think I can. No, no, nothing in France that's popping into my head.
It's interesting. It's like every time you hear of a group or some sort of movement, it's like France. France seems to be the center for a lot of these like different movements. I find that interesting throughout history, like French Revolution, like these guys in the '60s. I'm sure a few other things in France, but it's like France is just like it's like a hotbed for just like creativity for artistic and like revolution ideas. Like it's interesting.
I think France is the center of audacity, and that's where they get it from. Like you have the audacity to do a revolution where the rest of the world's just barely catching up. I think France the center. Even though they didn't start revolution, like they didn't coin it or whatever, but they seem to know how to do it pretty good. I don't know.
They're very organized, and their labor, from their labor movement to their grassroots, is very organized.
There's a method. There's a sauce to their madness.
There we go. That's an interesting discussion for some other time. It's just like what makes France's like organizing these like movements and ideas so successful. That would be fun to talk about
Right.
Voltaire and stuff like that.
I think it's about liberation, freedom of man, the individual freedoms of man. Because as in feudal times, 15, 1600s, it was the king who was oppressing everyone equally. So it didn't matter who you were. If you weren't nobility, you were oppressed equally. And so this is where you get man's individual freedom, man's natural liberties in those Enlightenment period philosophers. I think that materialized through the expression of the individual's labor, that they went ahead and conducted a revolution in the ways that they desired to materialize their liberty. So, of course, in the liberty, right, Central Europe is Eurocentrism. It's white. It's Western type of liberation and revolution. Didn't mean that it wasn't at the core a revolution. It wasn't turning over. It was turning over monarchy to another mode of production or another mode of organization. But we understand that it was Eurocentric, it was white, it was Western, that type of. So it was more a bourgeois revolution. But yeah, I think it was an interesting discussion. Why does France do it the best? I think it's because they've been hitting it every single time they did it.
We need to channel France and a few other successful people, and I'm sure uh, with given enough like talking about it and stuff, we could put together something like that, because definitely can tell that like the last like 4 or 5 years have been a bit more successful than say some of the stuff in the past.
Right. Those 404, I think just another minute won't hurt. But we're going to get ahead and get started. So thank you all for who are here. Thank you if you're watching on YouTube. Um, Topics, we've been on a Veblen binge for a little bit, talking about social theory, critiquing production theory, of course, always critiquing capitalism as the privatized mode of production. But I think I want to reel it back, start talking about how my nodes right here, mutual aid versus charity, which we're going to get into in first, talking about human nature, community, which is just compounding coalitions. So I want you guys to think of community as a bunch of coalitions coming together, and then more coalitions on top of those coalitions to form what we call a community. And I don't know if we're going to get into it, probably. So we're going to talk about the definition of a class. What is a class? What does success mean in relation to class? This is what gives us our forces or contradictions in the system of capitalism, classes, and what it means to be successful. And then probably next week we can talk about democracy, because that is the core tenet of socialism, is to instill democracy. And so, as we were talking about with the Enlightenment period philosophers, they wanted to instill democracy, but not in the modes of production, but the modes of politics and philosophy. Production was, something that they had taken care of and handled because they were the owners of production already. The king just told them to do it, but they had within their means the mills, the the cotton weaving machines, and all of the means of producing within their control, in their immediacy, right? The king controlled everything, but within their immediacy, like they can physically hold the mic and call it theirs. The king just appropriated the products thereafter. But we can talk about democracy and how democracy of a bourgeois flavor is no more than just privatized politics and democracy. And where true democracy, of course, is the representation, fairness of representing an individual inside of a society. So without further ado, we're going to start from top to bottom, talk about mutual aid versus charity. And this is a very important idea to understand, especially when you're organizing decentralized and but you're organizing in general, fighting in the resistance against capitalism, the privatized mode of production. So when we talk about mutual aid, you have the very first word that tells you that it's much different from charity. It's mutual. There is an exchange. There is a give and take at which there occurs a transaction in which both parties benefit from. It's a mutual type of aid. If I'm giving something, it's not really giving if I'm taking something in return. There is a mutual transaction in this aid that is happening. So I always go to the car example. I fix someone's car, someone mends my clothes, or I go ahead and, replace someone's flat tire on the road, and then they had in their car, for some reason, a big old ham. Give me that ham. Don't give me money. If you have something that I want, right, and I can do a service for you that you need, that's mutual aid. It's not charity. And the idea of charity, I would say, is almost entirely in this new sense, in this 21st century, a bourgeois kind of idea. Because what is charity if not just excess wealth being distributed through a private interest? So you only do a charity to feel good about the fact that you have a lot of wealth, right? And the fact that you can indiscriminately, at your choosing, just whoever needs this, they get to have it. So that's charity. That's not that giving of a mutual sense. Charity is that I will choose who gets this money, and I will choose who gets this wealth. And this wealth, of course, is from a privatized interest. So they're not doing it more or less, right? So an individual who does give away charity can have it within their heart to give out all of their wealth to, a foundation. And that's good, right? This helps people. Charity does help people, but fundamentally, charity is not mutual aid, and charity is that maintaining of the structures of hierarchy at the fundamentals, right? Fundamentally, charity bakes within the schemes of hierarchy, because charity is choosing whether or not to give your wealth. Charity is good once it's given out, but the structures of charity itself just enforces and reinforces the structures of capitalism, the freedom to attain wealth, and then the freedom to choose where to give that wealth. See, in a mutual aid, you're not really giving. charity people feel my tax breaks. Yeah, and they do it for us, the system. Yeah. So few people actually give out money in their charity, but fundamentally it reinforces the hierarchy. So yeah, when we talk about tax breaks, right? You're playing the system. So you're not doing it for a particular person. You're not doing it for a particular quote unquote a good, but you're not doing it for, as I would say, a quantitative public and a majority, the interest in the public. You're doing it for a private, aka a minority interest, and that minority, of course, is yourself, either of your feelings, of your taxes, to play the system, right? So charity, of course, is this idea that I can give wealth whoever. Mutual aid is where I can just, or not just, I need something, someone else needs something, we come meet in the middle, and then we're all happy. And that's what mutual aid is all about, meeting people in the middle. Charity is me extending my hand all the way out and then giving you what you need, and then not helps. It's like the horse, right? You can lead a horse to a well or a pond, but if the horse don't drink, it don't drink. We are leading the horse and making it drink, and then walking it back to a place with no water. We're the person committing to the charity is always doing everything. There is no mutual sense to a charity, right? When you hit that donate button of $20, the only thing you're receiving back is goodwill, is good feeling, is that immaterial manifestations of your people, of your feeling, right? How you feel good about charity, which is fine, which is good, and you're helping people when you donate to charity, but it's not the same as mutual aid. So mutual aid, you're getting something in return as well. When you give out, you take something of a material sense. You don't give out in a charity and take something. That's not a charity. Most people call that a transaction. So in a charity, when you just give out money, 20, 30, 40, but when you see like billionaires do out that charity, hundreds of $1 million, $1 billion, or whoever, to a foundation, most of the time, if not all the time, those large amounts are for a tax break, aka for a private interest. Because who helps, or what, a tax break helps? Who helps in that situation? The tax break helps the individual giving out that money. Doesn't help more so the people who got the money, right? If they're giving it to an external foundation, because why a bunch of times the Bill Gates billionaires will donate to their own foundation, which just gets circled back into their bank untaxed. So of course, charity in the ways that it's developed in our system, not very good for your community. Mutual aid is that direct. I'm going to give you this. Please give me that because I need that. You need what I have and I need what you have. Let's meet in the middle and exchange, and so that we can get ourselves, up to our wherever we need to be, right? You have a fixed car. I have something to eat tonight that isn't like, rice and soy sauce. I have a ham from the car that I fixed. So there's always a give and take, but the give and take is needs, right? I fulfill your need, you fulfill my need. In a charity, the only need being fulfilled is that immaterial feeling of that blessing, is that, oh, I feel good now. I've helped out a lot of people. Wow. That is the charity that we're talking about. And that's more so or less the charity that exists when we're talking about the systems of capital. It's people having wealth, and that wealth being chosen to be given out wherever. So mutual aid and charity will found this conversation, but we're going to move on to giving and human nature. And there's a video I saw of a comrade who made a video about human nature, and it was quite spot on. I might link it at the end of this. But we're talking about giving, right? We're bordering on the idea of charity, but understand why we give, right? In a mutual aid sense too, we give as well. And we give many more things than the material items, right? We give labor in our mutual aid, because mutual aid is meeting people in the middle. When you meet people in the middle, there is some sort of labor being exerted on both ends. In a charity, it's only one end and it's yours, right? So giving and human nature will help us found this next conversation on the steps of mutual aid and charity, or versus. So human nature, as under capitalism, people say people are inherently greedy. And there are a bunch of arguments against that, and it's just a bunch of baloney, okay, that people are inherently greedy. Just how I believe people are inherently good. There are a bunch of good people in the world, as there are many greedy people, but they're one and the same, because those are just reactions or adaptations to the material condition at which the individual discovers upon existing in the material condition. So what makes people greedy? People think it's inherent. Some people think it's genetic. Some people think it's something that you can't change out of the individual, when really, in reality, and what is observed, and what we can see in the material condition, is that people are not because they are, but because of the material condition, because of what they exist in. And you see this many, many a time. And as we grow our population, right, as we keep having babies, and as we keep having these intricate transactions intercommunally or internationally, we start to begin to see that the material representation of the individual, the human, isn't bound by what the human looks like, right? Anyone can look like anything that they want. It is the material condition at which people exist in that changes them. So I don't want to get too many into this identity politics, this liberal identity politics. But black faces in high places, I always think of Obama and Beyonce and all of these, popular people of color in these positions, right? It doesn't not make them a part of the ruling class for them to enemies of the people. Exactly. It does not make them enemies of what we're trying to do, because they are aligning themselves with the structures at which what made them quote unquote successful, which made them and allowed them to attain such capital, in which directly or indirectly allowed for the exploitation and the extraction of the surplus value from the working class. And we see this, happen, right? You can't grow in a system of capital without, having yourself some capital, and that constitutes, with its existence of capital, the exploitation of labor. So they believe this is human nature. This is how we're supposed to, exist and be in the system. And it's all founded on competition. So charity is, I would say, a theme of competition. It's not, in some cases, it's, human conditioning, but it's about who can give out more, or who can give out, to the best charity or whoever. There's always this relationship, towards other people in this competitive scheme that is charity. There's nothing competitive about mutual aid. It's all cooperation, which is what I always contrast against competition. So when we talk about human nature, people think, oh, human nature is competitive. It's fight, eat or be eaten, dog eat dog world out here. However, what we observe and analyze in our communities is quite opposite. It is actually cooperation that helps the individual thrive in these conditions. So competition, right? Even though competition is this, yes, say something. Who's the mic on? So I'll talk a little louder, see if we can, get going. But when we're talking about human nature, we're talking about competition. It is not, you can't leave out the fact that people inherently are too, as well, cooperative. So there exists inherencies. We can be competitive, and we can also be cooperative as well. So in our human nature, there exists both, right? In our competition, it's just the ways at which we compete with one another. Oh my God, a rocket ship is flying up over there. So in human nature, competitive and competition, they exist in both spaces, but only apparently one in society, in our capitalist society, one is true. We are competitive, which is a silly notion to draw to conclusion of, because you're ignoring how people are cooperative, how people just want to give in the giving, just to give, just to do stuff like me right here, right now. I don't have to do this. I want to do this. I love doing this. I love talking to people about this politics and the philosophies and talking about, the world's socioeconomic, status. But we talk about human nature, especially talking about people in this liberal society, and it's always, no, we're competitive, we're greedy. Human nature, that's what it is. That's why the world is way it is right now. And yeah, that is the way the world, why it is right now, because people are greedy, but not inherently so. It's a fool's way to think that it encourages greed. Love that you said that. Just how socialism would encourage cooperation. It's all about this encouraging. I know we talked about this last week. I pulled up that quote. Is the material conditions rearrange, not because we're here to force it, but by help of our hand, they rearrange themselves. The human rearranges themselves based off the material condition. And if the material condition says to be greedy, you are going to be greedy. It's like math. It's like a formula. 1 + 1 = 2. That's exactly how it's going to happen. That doesn't validate the fact that we should let it keep happening, but in fact, it does. Or in fact, it does happen, and we are able to analyze it. And that is what's the beautiful thing about understanding the absolute truths of the material condition, is that things are, not inherently, but follow some sort of formula at which we can analyze, understand, and then articulate. as we do right now, as we're talking. We're able to articulate such thoughts, such phenomena, to where we can all understand that people are right the way they are because of a particular reason. Now, I didn't watch Squid Games 2. I did watch Squid Games 1, but it is conditioning that this you have all these people up here, your top, your 1%, you're concentrated, your private interest, owning the means of production, and then forcing people to do these things, which will help them, right? Because money is that aid in material condition, as the way the material conditions have materialized, manifested themselves because of that exertion expression. I would say dating back from the Enlightenment period, from the bourgeois revolutions, is why the world the way it is now, right? Pro-liberal, center politics, at least outside of America, right? We're like way right leaning, but that's because we're way conservative. That's because we love capital. That's the reasons why we do stuffs. It's because of the ways we do stuffs in the past. Our past folds and compounds into the present. So what have we been doing for the past 300 years? Colonizing. Why are we going to stop anytime soon, or at least to the American sense? Why is America going to stop anytime soon? Stop colonizing. It's been working for them for the past 300 years. Why stop now? Right? The past compounds into the present, which then makes the structures past plus present into the future. So if you don't change anything about your past and you keep doing stuff in the present, it's basically you're telling your own future you're going to keep doing the same thing unless something changes. And that revolution, right, is what causes that change. Is that shift in perspective on a global scale, which helps us understand the material conditions that much better, right? Because the bourgeois of the 17th, 16th, 18th century, right, when they were revolting against their monarchy, right, as we would consider our bourgeois, our oligarchy, they existed in such conditions at which they did not have, right, analysis of the material condition. They did not have the understanding through a dialectical sense and, this articulation of our theory and so all they had was king and man. And they did not like the king, so they went with man. And man is the being that thinks, right? And so this is where we spawn our human nature. This is where we can derive our charity and mutual aid. That human nature, if it's not the king, it's man. And man is the one who thinks and bees and exists. But they didn't get that far into the existence as an existential philosophy. They went through the ideal and liberal philosophy, which of course helped them get out of being oppressed by the monarchy, but it didn't go all the way to have that true nature of all men created equal, or all beings created equal. The people are born with unalienable rights, right? They hit those on the head, kinda, but in the way they materialized it, it was Eurocentric, it was white, it was Western. And so this layered, even though it wasn't in the forefront of thought, it was layered into their schemes and the ways they philosophized and materialized their philosophy. And this is what we see now, right? France being the hub of revolution. That's because it was around that area in Central Europe that did all of these ideas and all these philosophies, all of these theories craft and come up and whatnot. So human nature from this point, right, because of the way they revolutionized, because of the way that our Enlightenment period thinkers thought, enlightened, philosophized, do we understand human nature? Because it wasn't king that was human nature. It must be something else. And this is where the Voltaire's and the Rousseau's and the Descartes landed in that understanding of the material condition through their perspective. Human nature is to be individual, to have freedoms, to have rights. And to no fault to them, they were living in such much more oppressive conditions than we do now, right? If we were living in a monarchy, I probably wouldn't have all this nice, cool gear, all this, all this stuff and all this roofs and stuff in the ways that we do. It would be very much different had we had that level of competent monarchy. But in the material conditions that we do, we get to think about our material conditions in our exact moment, which does create, at least for Marx's, in the which way we think, is that dialectical sense, is the historical understanding, is that material analysis, is those articulations at which help us understand our material conditions now. And understand how Marx thought, and the Lenins, the Rosa Luxemburgs, and all the Eastern Bloc philosophers, then going over to the West, you have all of these 1800, 1900 thinkers who derive their meaning from the liberal, or I guess the primitive liberal, the natural liberty mode of thought, the Enlightenment period mode of thought, right? They only had that them to compare their philosophies, their material condition. We, on the other hand, have the benefit of doing both. We can understand natural liberty, feudal era thinking, and we can understand dialectical primitive capitalism thinking. And then we can synthesize that into what we would consider a socialism mode of thinking, a more forward as a mode of production mode of thinking. And remember, season 2. Oh yeah, I was talking about that. So we talk about giving, right? We're not talking about giving yet, but human nature. That's where we stem our human nature from the liberal mode of thought, or from the Enlightenment period natural liberty mode of thought, where individualism ranks at the peak, at the top, at what people are. People are the way they are because they're individual. That's a good step in the right direction, but execution was horribly flawed. So human nature at this point, right, if you were in the 17th, 18, 1900s, this was the individual, hyper-individualism that people are. You took that philosophy from the white European, Central, Western, hegemony, and then adopted it into various types of revolutions, materializations, expressions, at which what makes the world now, right? Our incredible patriarchy, which was still present in the feudal era, but now I feel like it's more so hammered into the conditions of society. Patriarchy, penis holding people. Yeah, woo, good for the man. But this is what is described as human nature because it's what we have seen. And just because we have seen it and materialized it and it can articulate it through history doesn't make it absolutely true. It's only absolutely true to the relative sense. And the relative sense is that, yeah, it did happen, but that's not human nature. We can call it out because we can even go over back farther in history to talk about primitive communism, which only helps our argument. But this is where we understand historically and how developments happen in human nature. Human nature is just adaptation, cooperation, and living in the material condition. If you are held at gunpoint, which is metaphorically what happens if you live in America, if you're held at gunpoint, someone tells you work a damn job, you're gonna work a damn job because you have a gun pointed at your head. Now, it may not be a real gun, it may not be a real firearm. It could be the threat of losing your sustenance, the material condition, aka if you lose your paycheck, no more home, no more water, no more food, no more safety, no more emotional outlets. You are crippled by this system, right? Because you are reliant on the system to provide you all of your needs. And to who faults is that? Not the individual participating, because every single individual born now was not born when the capitalism was being materialized. So we keep perpetuating this system. Of course, no fault to us, right? The owners of production are who keep perpetuating, and the owners of production are the ones who can create the change in the material condition. Because when you own production, or when you own the means to produce, you own how people do stuff. And when you own how people do stuff, then you can more or less tell people how to do stuff, right? So when you own the means to drink or make clean drinking water, then if people want to survive and you own the means to produce clean drinking water, you are the ones who holds people by their cojones. Hey, do stuff for me, or you will not get clean drinking water. So what does the individual do in their cooperative and adaptive nature? They cooperate and adapt to the fact that they do not have the means within themselves to produce clean drinking water. So what do? Whatever the person who has that ownership, whatever they want. So that is human nature, right? Human nature is not inherently bad. It's just inherently adaptive at its most basic sense. In our discussions, I would even go as far as say as cooperative humans are, because people naturally want to help, right? The video I'm going to link, I probably want to link it now. The human nature is this, being cooperative, right? And then we could talk about this in the capitalist sense too. When people are being cooperative in this capitalism, people are thinking that we're doing fine, we're doing great because we're doing this primordial helping of the hand, moving along production. We're doing this sort of this, I would almost say faux cooperation, but it is real cooperation, but founded on the schemes of competition, right? Capitalism is a mode of production that is inherently competitive because it needs profits to grow. But where do you get that profits? By competition. There's no cooperation in capitalism, because cooperation is the exact opposite of privatization. And capitalism is all about that privatization, is that me, myself, and I, individualism, keep stuff, there, segregation, vertical relationships, right? Have a system in place and where, we can mediate our transactions and whatnot, alienating the individual from these processes, like talking things out. No, don't talk to me. Talk to the police. They'll figure it out, not removing and stripping away of the individual in such process. So our human nature isn't, inherently greedy. It's just adaptive to the material condition. And so when things do get a little rough and ready, when things do get kind of, a little bit, kind of scary, what does the individual do? What does the human do? Adapt. The individual does nothing but adapt to the material condition. And so when we reinforce these ideas of community, cooperation, so does, you can see in the materialization, the expressions of the individual, more cooperation, more of a nice behavior, more of a nice aura, more of a friendly, warm, welcoming, type of atmosphere emitted from the individual, because they are surrounded by this cooperation. But of course, as we understand, if you are surrounded by this competition, you are going to only ooze this privacy, this savagery, this hasteness, this kind of sense of urgency, this must be, or this what ought to be, what not to be, right? Competitive, you versus me, us versus them. It's always a versus, and it's always a signification, and competition founds class. And I think we can bring this discussion of class a little sooner, so we're talking about human nature. But let me look up this video, and I'll link it in. If you want to watch it after, I'd highly recommend it. It's like 25 minutes. Hold on. There it is. So that by comrades at the collective, they are proud commies, as so as am I. Proud commies, more specifically a Marxist-Leninist, but you don't have to be identify with any sort of political, agenda or, ideology to understand that human nature is not inherently greedy. It is adaptive and cooperative. And more so, right, we as humans must live in a community. We must live because that is who we were. That's who we are. That's what we do. That's how we be. That's what we fuck with. We fuck with humanity and we fuck with community. And that is being stripped away in the capitalist mode of production. Why do you think we see so much of this, downturn in mental health? Why do you think we see so much of this downturn in the efficiency of the production and how things are, but then, the growth of technology? There's just so many things to talk about when you're talking about human nature inside of capitalism, right? To draw that relationship, draw that comparison. But if you want to take a look at that video afterwards, highly recommend it. 26 minutes of human nature, all great, all dandy, over at people at the collective. So talk about the human nature, giving, community. This is where we talk about coalitions. So we talked about mutual aid versus charity and how people, right? We're still talking about the individual and what the individual does. Mutual aid is that give and take for a purpose, the fulfillment of need mutually. The charity, of course, is that giving of wealth discriminately. Did I say indiscriminately before? It was discriminate because they are choosing where to give that wealth. So choosing to where to give wealth is that private, is that I will choose myself where I will give out my $5 for a charity. Mutual aid is that need fulfillment on both sides. Giving in human nature is not, inherently greedy. It's just adaptive and cooperative. And then community. I wrote down the coalition of families and then the coalition of individuals. So this actually stems from a theory that I am working on. It's just the progression of coalitions. And the coalition is just the gathering of entities, not so much specifically people, but when we're talking about a society, it's people and individuals. So a coalition of who? People. And then the compounding coalition of people. And I denote these in particular relationships to of no quantitative, right, limit, but of an observable limit, an observable relationship, both of the quantity, not just strictly the quantity, but also the land use, the resource use, and understanding how the relationships and the working relationships function inside of this coalition. So we have at the very core and the fundamental understanding and the basis of what makes a community is the individual. It's the one person, because you can't make a community out of nothing. And a bunch of individuals must have came from somewhere, and it's always reducible, or at least you can always quantitatively define, right, the community to one individual. So we start at the basis of just one individual. Hi, me, or you, anyone. It could be anyone, just the one person. Think of yourself, think of anyone, think of one person. Now think of two people. Oh my God, now we're getting a little crazy. Now we're cooking a little bit. So in a community, there's always more than one person. That's why we say in a community, not just a single person. So in the coalition of individuals, whether it be more than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I call this a family. Now, it may not be a blood family, but a family is just a coalition of individuals based off the working relationships inside of it. And we'll talk about a family when we talk about mom or dad or some kids. I'm talking about like primitive, spear throwing, loincloth wearing, primitive families. So the dad and the mom will go hunt out. Maybe there's a grandma in the family that we can share knowledge to the children, and the children, of course, are growing themselves. This is a functional family or a coalition of individuals, because who is grandma? Just an individual. Who are the kids? Just individuals themselves. And who are mom and dad? Materially, just individuals, but they're a coalition. There is some sort of binding factor at which, holds their dynamics together. And I call this the coalition. Whatever that binding factor makes that dynamic denotes that coalition. And so when you have this close proximity of individuals specifically in this family dynamic, you have a coalition of individuals. So let's say dad is strong. He can hunt, right? He can take down boars, cows or lions or whatever. He can bring home the meat. And then the mom goes out and forages, really keen eye of understanding what plants to pick, what not, what's poisonous, this expertise of knowledge about the faunage and flora of the land. And then the grandma, of course, who has that same knowledge, passes that knowledge down to the kids. And then the kids themselves only get smarter because they know what to expect before they go out into the wild. This is a functioning coalition of individuals, a family. Now, it doesn't have to be this primitive, right? We can think of families as this one right here, right? Where we have in this sort of, for lack of better terms, a teacher and student kind of relationship. But this is also considered a family. This is a coalition of individuals. We're all individuals here, binded by a specific purpose, right? Which is industrious, I'll say productive. But of course, it's just a binding factor that holds us together as individuals, coalitioning. So in our coalition of individuals, we're not yet at that community because you need multiple coalition of individuals to create what would you consider a community, because a family is just a family. It's a very small community, but when we talk about a community itself, it's autonomous to the material condition. It allows people to do stuff at which they weren't allowed to do before. So let's say you had one family, right, who just hunts, who acts as all the fathers in the previous family. This one family does all the hunting. Call them the hunting family. And then maybe later on in development, this one family only does blacksmithing. Let's call them the smiths. And let's say one family, in the future, does fishing. We'll call them, the fishing family or whatever. These individual families themselves are considered individuals to the community, which is just a larger coalition of, concern. So we go from the coalition of individuals who themselves, individuals, are respected in their traits, their expertise of knowledge, their labor, their their existences. But then you go up, right, to this status of a larger coalition, the community. Now, each family is denoted of a particular contribution to society or a particular essence or value at which can denote their existence as one family. We'll give them a family name. Hi, I'm Jaden Certeza. That's my family name. My first name denotes my individual existence, and then the last name denotes of a larger coalition, larger existence, right? So in our coalition of the families now, where you have multiple families, each family does one thing. And in a thriving society, in a thriving, connected community, each family does one thing and helps the community out altogether. So the one family does the fishing, the one family does the hunting, the other one does the smithing, the other one maybe do the building, maybe one does the farming, maybe one, X, Y, Z, and so on and so forth, to contribute to the health of the community. So in our community building, right, we go up in steps, but we're not going to get that far. The progression of coalition is a much larger theory, but understanding that the coalition of the individual starts at the individual and then grows within the working relationships in the family and in the larger community. So even though you, the individual yourselves, can, produce out of your labor some extraordinary contributions to society, you are going to be put in place, right? Not so appropriately, not so, hostilely, but put in the place at which you are most effective in society, right? This is what yields us a functional and a very robust workings of relationships in a community, in a society, right? Not everyone's a doctor. Not everyone's a mechanic. Not everyone's going to be a bricklayer. Not everyone's going to be a chef. Not everyone's going to be everything. And we don't need that. We don't need everyone to be everything. Not all men are created equal, right? As opposed to Thomas Jefferson, where that guy said, all men are created equal. Wah, wah. Karl Marx more so correctly assumes and assesses that all individuals are different. No point in trying to make everyone equal because everyone can contribute in their own special ways. And these special ways will help develop society further. And this development of society is much more integral than the people trying to be equal. The silly notion of, we're all equal to the productive and capacity sense. But when you say all people are equal overall, it kind of leads for me, a bad taste in the mouth because not all people are equal. Hi, I'm Jaden Man, penis holder. And then I'm not equal to, some lady who of the vagina holder. I'm not equal to them, both materially, physiologically, immaterially, we're not equal. But we understand the sense of which people, all people are created equal. That notion is where we must treat people the way we ought to be treated. That kind of vibe, that kind of gist. But, it's that vague language and the ideal language really when all are equal, all is like definitive and absolute to the sense it gives you that sense of, oh yeah, it's this moral, or this ideal sense. It must be this way. All men are created equal. But then you create a law and a system of structure that's, anyways, that's an entirely different discussion. I will go on a little sidetrack. That's me rambling about, a liberal mode of thought and understanding. Some animals are more equal than others. Yeah, I've heard that too. Yeah, some people are just more equal than others. Some things just more equal than X, Y, and Z. All that nonsense. So we talk about the community. I guess we are going to get to class stuff, but let's recap a little bit. I get a little drink of water. Mutual aid, give, take, fulfillment of need, charity, giving, whoever, wherever, however you want, individualism, right? I choose where my money is spent and whatnot. Giving in human nature, understanding that historically and understanding the material condition that don't ask silly questions because none of the questions are silly. Sorry, this might sound a little silly, but we're disability fit in those who lack. So this goes to Marx, to each according to his ability and need. What is it? Can someone jot that down word for word? But Karl Marx in the Gotha program is each according to his need, each according to his ability, right? So for in this case, disability, right? There's a lot more need. And this is no fault to the individual who was born. Some people do need more. And this isn't bad or goodness. It just is. Some people just do need more. And the fact that some people can produce more without them needing to take all of that back, as an equal, right? Some people overproduce, which allows for that redistribution of, goods or whatever, services, however, from each according to his ability to each according to his need, right? So whoever can do stuff, thanks, Day. Whoever can do stuff, right? When I like to say when people do stuff, shit gets done. And when shit gets done, it happens for a reason. But when people overproduce, like say capable people, right? It doesn't take all 8, 10, 12 hours in the day for one person to survive, right? It only takes a few hours in the day of productive labor, of organized labor to produce and materialize sustenance and sustainative conditions for the individuals, right? It only takes a few hours to hunt for a boar that'll last you 2 or 3 days. Now that you don't have to go hunt out for a couple days, right? Maybe you want to gather water that can last you for a day or two, right? We can produce and sustain our material conditions by mere hours on the days per ratio, right? We don't have to work a lot to get enough of what we need. So when we're addressing the questions of disability, right? And this goes back to the competitive schemes. It's that do your own work, pull your bootstraps up, right? Do it yourself. That individualism. We don't fuck with that around here. That's kind of stinky. I smell that and I'm like, oh my God, get me out of here. I don't like that. So when we do talk about disability, it's you can produce what you can, right? Each according to his ability and each according to his needs, whatever the needs is. So let's say someone needs a lot and they can't produce a lot. Well, what if someone can produce a lot but doesn't need a lot? Like me, I'm a fucking hermit crab. I'll produce the shit out of anything and everything. Just give me some like a steak every once in a while. I don't know, rice and soy sauce. I'm like a plant. Just give me some sunlight and I'm fine. To me, the community, the serviceability of my labor to the community, that's fine. Do whatever. Like people can have all the fun they want, so as long as I'm taken care of and I don't need a lot to be taken care of. That's just me though, right? But I know for a fact there's a lot of people out there because people are generous. People love to give. And when you have a lot of people that can give in that sense, right? Then you have a functioning society, or you have a functioning dynamic at which we addresses the question, where do people with disabilities fit into this? In society, with us, next to us, rubbing shoulders, you know? There's no need to discriminate. There's no need to, you know, have this arbitrary question of, wait, that person didn't do everything themselves, they're scummy, or some silly notion like that. So the only thing silly about your question is the fact that there exist such conditions which allow for you to ask that question. So which is what we're fighting against, which is what you're striking against. Right, you're striking against not asking that question, not needing to have that question. We wouldn't have even been having this discussion, right, if it not were the material conditions that which oppress us equally, right? So lovely question. I love it. Those who lack ability are just simply just taken up by those who can produce. So don't worry. There are good people out there everywhere. Everywhere exists good people. Hi, I'm one of those good people. But, you know, there's so many more good people out there that would do that. Yes. There's people who work it. So, and then if you produce a lot, you eat a lot, and you can do that because you can produce a lot. Now, here's the rub. What about the people who don't produce anything and then eat a lot still? Unfortunately, people, that is a result of human conditioning. That's a capitalism problem. And it also comes from the notions of intaking and consuming hyper individualistic media. That's a really weak argument. Oh, what if people don't do work? You're calling people lazy? You mean you're calling the billionaires what they are? Lazy? So when people don't produce but consume a lot, think of a billionaire. Think of someone who exploits. Think of a landlord. Those landlords. But yeah, your question, like, very valid. No silly questions around here, because we want to have this warm and welcoming, inviting community in this space in which people can freely express themselves, which we don't find many places here in capitalism, which we don't find many places here in the U.S. imperialism. It's people feeling free to express themselves. Yeah, don't do that in these like normalized spaces of the U.S. imperial court. You're going to get bullied, unfortunately. But thank you that you're here asking those questions. I will gladly overproduce. Like when someone says, who's going to pay that in taxes? Who's going to pay for the kid? Me. I will. I will pay for the kids to have free meals in schools. Me and a bunch of other people. Because we know and understand why this nutrition for the kids is good inherently. All right. So good question. Love it. Keep them coming. We're going to move on to this very, very nice discussion of class. So we're going to start off this discussion with class. What is it? What's the thing with class? You hear working class, ruling class, bourgeois class, the disenfranchised class. Who are these people? What is class? So we go back to what I like to go back to is an existential philosophy, or a material understanding of the conditions we experience. So what is class? I like to denote class to a specific set of conditions at which articulable upon observation, at which attachable, this is where you get class, attachable to a specific individual. And it's just one individual, because we all are regarded as the one individual. Class, of course, is this umbrella of all of those individuals who experience the same conditions, right? When we say working class, that same condition being experienced is the unilateral oppression against the bourgeois class, and that class themselves to their own conditions at which make their existence, right? And we normally call that capital owning as a condition. That's what makes them a bourgeois class. So a disenfranchised class, the men class, I would say penis holder, very easy to spot. The women class, vagina holders, very easy. Proletariat class, individuals who are forced to sell their labor for success as the material condition. Very easy. But when we talk about class and what is class, it is a particular set of conditions at which the individual exists in that describes their, whatever they live in, their condition. So it just describes, and this description is describing, you're seeing what's going on in the material condition at which you then apply that definition. It's not prescriptive. It's not, it must be this way, right? You are part of this class because of this. We are seeing, or you're part of this class because we can see how you exist, right? We can see how you sell your labor for a paycheck and then can barely save any money for your retirement. Oh, you're proletariat. Or we can see, oh, that person owns a lot of capital and businesses and doesn't really work, but still owns 5 yachts. Oh, you're definitely part of the ruling class, right? It's not prescriptive. We analyze the material conditions first to make up the class. So class, in this broadest sense, is just observing the material conditions at which the individuals exist in, and then understanding how those, oh my God, my little guy right there. That's that fucking terror. But understanding the material conditions at which exists in there to then apply that definition. Right? Because we have to understand first and see and understand what we're seeing to call anything out first. It's not like I see that guy, oh my God, the loveliest, cutest thing ever. No, don't be fooled. He's actually a fucking menace to society. That guy right there. But that is where we get that observation. That is where we understand our material conditions first, that things are inherently the way they are, to use a prescriptive definition. But understand that people, and you must understand their material conditions, how they exist, in order to even apply such a class, right? So our classes come from the observation of the material condition. Why does the proletariat exist? Well, in a relationship between why the bourgeois exists. You couldn't describe a proletariat individual, right, without describing the bourgeois individual. You wouldn't be able to describe a man without describing a woman, right? Unless, there wouldn't be no discussion of a man if there was no woman. It would just be a person, right? It would just be someone. You wouldn't even call them a man. You could call them a man, but there would be no relationship articulable between that and another to create that class. There would be no man class. So this is where we get, teetering waters here. But this is where you get into reductionism, right? And describing that, oh, there's only bourgeois and proletariat. Oh, there's only working class and ruling class. And it lacks intersectionality, which is important to understand, which is why we get on this teeter, right? Intersectionality is not liberal identity politics, because we understand that multiple things are the way they are. Intersectional. So I'm a man, penis holder. I am the oppressor of the women class. I'm sorry, ladies. I was born like this. I can't control it. But I'm also part of the working class, and we must stand in solidarity. But what concerns us most in the material conditions, which it is the forces of production at which we concern ourselves with. Because how do people do stuff? By using the material conditions to express themselves. And so it is the material conditions and the forces of production that we must concern ourselves with, because that is how we live, right? The fact that I'm a man in the class war of men and women, it's not me who's directly oppressing women. It's the people who own the means of production. It's the people who are making the laws, who are making the systems and structures, who are allowing for the thought of a corporation, and billionaires to exist and continue to exist, that equally oppress both men and women as a class, even though, I am still part of the men class who oppress the women, right, in our patriarchy. But understanding that there's no pecking order of, first it's the patriarchy, then it's, then the capitalism, then it's the oligarchy. Doing away with that. We don't like that. Yes. So I like to be a little funny, a little goofy, right? The way you have this designation for male, penis holder, vagina holders, and all are brilliant. So, but I like to have a little fun with it, right? To bring in this light, to help bring it for the discussion, because most of the topics that we talk about politically are not welcoming discussions. I try to make those discussions as welcoming as possible by rooting it in the observation of the material condition. And funnily enough, one of those observations to make the distinction between men and women are penises and vaginas, and that is hilarious. That is absolutely funny, and it brings up a lighter light to our conversations. So as me, the man of the penis holding class, hello, I do not mean any harm to the women class of the vagina holders, because we stand in solidarity of knowing who is the actual oppressors here. Oligarchy, the bourgeois, the ruling class, the individuals who own capital and keep the exploitive labor practices in place that manage our mode of production. So penis holders and vagina holders unite as women and women classes against the bourgeois, who all of us are working class. And of course, it's not just, penis and vagina holders, right? That excludes other classes, but we talk about classes in a relationship, right? Reducible to at least two. So we talk about two. Yes, that's exactly where I was coming off of. So that's I wasn't afraid of that, but this is what I was getting onto. And I love that you have this question. So I was specifically talking about in a relationship between man and women. And how do you denote those particular existences in the material condition? Penis and vagina. When you're specifically talking about a man and a woman as classes, I love that you brought this up. However, does it conflate gender with genitalia, which come out transphobic? and it does, and it is, right? I'm not gonna dodge a bullet there. Oh my God, you got me. But when we do talk about other genders and other expressions of sexualities, we must do so, right, in a relationship at which we understand the forces at which constitute their class struggle. And of course, the class struggle, of course, is trans and cis. So, hi, I'm cis. I'm sorry, trans people. I didn't mean to, step on your foot there. But we must understand that things exist in a relationship of two, at least, right? So this is not to say that men and women don't exist exclusive, right, away from trans people, other people of other genders and sejexualities, but to describe the relationship, it is between two. Now, you can still have a class war between the cis, like, the majority of the man, right, against trans people. So, loving that you brought this up. Hopefully, I didn't get to it fast enough. I'm sorry, but it does come off as a little bit transphobic, and there's no way avoiding that, right? You can only come off as sincere as you can. The oppressing class for the oppressor is that the relationship? Yes. So it is oppressing oppressor. So but it is not like a definitive someone is committing against violence against others, right? Oppressing oppressor. But you're talking about and describing in relation to the entire mode of production and society. So in this society is a patriarchy, man, which also the patriarchy oppresses against trans class and overt sexuality classes as well in the patriarchy. So I'm sorry to sit up at the top. Very sorry. I did not mean to do this. It's not my fault, but I'm here advocating for that. Hopefully that can score me some brownie points. But understanding that, yes, it is the oppressor versus the oppressed. And this goes to, we had a conversation a while ago, was the, I don't know, of course. You can attack me all you want, because we're here to learn, right? And if I had, this feeling of defensiveness, then there's something wrong with, my understanding of the world. Because I understand that people are the way they are, not inherently, of course. So we try not to get defensive here. No one should be attacking anyone, right? Because we're not attacking the person. And that is kind of the conversation we like to have. We're not attacking the person behind the keyboard. Me, I'm behind the keyboard. But we're not attacking people behind. We're attacking the idea at most, right? We're attacking the notions of it, at which it exists in the material condition. So, lovely question. Thank you. Keep them coming. It is 5 minutes still, so don't keep them coming, right? So we talk about class, and I did talk about success. We're going to talk, last thing we'll talk about is that success, divide and conquer. Yes, division of labor in production, and then division of identity, which is liberal identity politics, right? As where they exist separate, where the penis holder, where the men class and the women class and the cisgender and the transgender must exist separately because they have some sort of inherent contradiction. And no. That's all lame and nonsense, where we're all here, community, commingling, coalitioning and whatnot. So what is class, right? Just describing the material condition of a particular individual. And then what is success? So we must always, success lives in the superstructure of society. It lives superfluous to how we conduct production, because success is all up here for us. Animals don't think of any success. That guy over there you saw, that cat, that freaking guy, that menace to society, doesn't care if he's successful or not. He's just living here. He's just here, farting around, pooping in the litter box every once in a while, scratching up everything, whatever that guy wants to do. But success is this relative and this subjective idea. There's nothing objective about success, because there's always a heavily reliant to the human condition, which constitutes success. And that condition more or less comes from the mind, from the, I think this is what I'm supposed to be, or I think this is good, this should be, I'm successful. What you more or less see in the capitalist mode of production as success is the attaining of capital, which is just a process itself, observable, articulable, no more than the processes of eating and such. Attaining capital, that's just a process. What is there to be, proud or successful about having capital? That just tells me that you just love to exploit people, how much you love capital and how much you love it. To me, that's not successful. Billionaires, not successful. Billionaires aren't successful. They are exploitive. They're exploiter. Yes. Well, yes. For Comrade Day coming in with the amazing analysis as well. But success, right? It's relative and it's subjective, right? I would consider myself just a little bit successful in the moments that I am now, right? If you were to look at my material condition and compare that to someone else in the system, of course, will be considered a failure, right? I won't get too into nitty-gritty details, but I don't work. I'm unemployed. I work, right? I still make money, but I don't work for traditionally. And that is that traditional. That is that success. That is that what I think is successful. But that class goes well into that success, right? Your pecking order, your class. And then in our capitalist society, lower, middle, upper, ruling, or billionaire, or upper, or whatever class, the distinctions of the material conditions you want to make to slap that definition on, right? Your class. And depending on where you are in your class determines your success because there is a relationship articulable. So I would say is the appropriation of that articulable relationship, which makes that mean anything, right? Success. You wouldn't have success or failure if you didn't know what success or failure looked like, right? I always say morally, you wouldn't know what good is until you knew what bad was. You wouldn't know what bad is until you know what good was, right? You wouldn't know because you wouldn't be able to compare. You wouldn't know what the best is if you didn't have a slightly okay or a worse version of what you experience. You wouldn't know what super good is if you didn't know what super bad is. There's always a relationship articulable at which you can derive a meaning, and the meaning comes from that relationship. So let's say you just are all of a sudden born into this big old mansion, or you go home and you're like on like 200 acres of well cared for lawn and the mansion on top, but the individual doesn't know anything about poverty, in the sense of that capitalism is that lacking of that nice lawn, the lacking of that house. They wouldn't know they had it so good, right? Because they wouldn't know what to compare it against. So you must have, I love to say, the experience of life, the understanding of the material condition, in order to even have some sort of foundation of understanding, to even call something good or bad, right? Now I find existing. Yes. Existing is resisting, especially in a system that tries to destroy your existence as a human who naturally is cooperative in a system that is built for competition. So existing, just being here, is resisting. Please don't take your life. Please call a hotline, or please reach out to one of us, because existing is resisting. It is that I am saying no to dying at the hands of the people who oppress us. That is existing is resisting. It's like revolutionary suicide, Hugh P. Newton. It's that I acknowledge the system of what it does. I don't want to participate with I don't want to do anything else with that. Screw all that capitalism stuff. am here to die for the materializations, the manifestations, and the realizations of a world more communal, of an interconnected world, more built on community and self-sustaining through the indigenous practices of the land. Right? Because there's nothing indigenous about America, right? Man-made lawns, Thornstein Veblen. Man-made lawn is an entirely idealistic sense of the material condition. It's that placing palm trees where they don't belong, or they're not native to the land, or it's placing particular structures which don't belong to the native land. Yes, revolutionary suicide is a great resource. I recommend reading it. I've dabbled a little bit for myself. I promise I'll get to it. I've got to get through my other stack first. But I've read here and there every now and then. Revolutionary suicide, great mantra to get in. That's not suicide, right? Contrary to the name. It's just the understanding that the system does not benefit you. And so therefore you must then yourself materialize that benefit through community, through mutual aid, through the understanding of the material condition dialectically. Be a dialectic. Just be educated. Just be and understand, right? Even if you can't commit to a mutual aid like initiative, just understand, be educated dialectically. So cool. That leaves us at that mutual aid, charity, human nature, community, classes, and success. I know we're a little bit over. So cut it right here. Thank you so much for being here. I'll see you for a couple more minutes. If you have any questions, ask them, type them out. If you don't, if you leave now, right? If you're on a time constraint, don't let me hold you. So this will be my last words. Thank you so much. Love all of you. I'll stay here for a couple more minutes. And then if no one else has anything to say, we will leave. We will be back next Wednesday, 1 hour, Pin the Year Strong. This will be uploaded to YouTube Friday. I'll schedule these on Fridays, even though it's happening on Wednesday. I know some shows do that. But thank you so much for being here. Love you all. Comrades, all proud of the people. Wah, wah, wah. I'll be here for a few minutes.
I will definitely say the little bit that I've known about, like communist theory, and taking a class on psychology and just like Psych 101. I'm just like, oh, that's interesting. So it goes with the tenets of the different types of people that we're talking about socialism and how it could be applied to society and in a more prosperous way for people to be a lot more happy and stuff. So it's just funny how like all these college courses promote like positive thinking, and then you find out all these people that are college educated are the opposite. So it's interesting how like it probably, long story short, it's probably predicated on like the social economic conditions of them growing up or the people that influence them outside of their education is what I'm thinking. I don't know. What do you think?
I would say higher learning, like college institutions, are liberal institutions. And so the individuals going into them may not themselves be liberal, but the fact that the institution itself bred on the structures and the forces of capitalism, but more so the higher learning of capital, so like educated and knowledge of understanding of the material condition, but through a liberal lens that like understanding the individual freedoms and such. So even though the individual themselves going through that college may not be liberal themselves, it's the courses that go through, the teachings exerted, and the value consumed or the learning consumed at which juts out this layer of understanding of the entire world. Because higher learning is like almost the pinnacle, the peak of education, and then the workforce is just how you produce value for the shareholders, or how you produce value for people to consume. Highest education, like college and masters, through this liberal institution is regarded as the highest form of education, and therefore the highest form of what is it, like respect, or is like the highest form of like notoriety when it comes to issuing an opinion, because you are so well versed in your education. So, but it's like the level of understanding that people have in the world only comes to their perspective of what the material conditions say to them. And in the liberal institutions, they say it ought to be this way, right? But when you understand the world through a dialectic perspective understanding, you understand that some things are, some things aren't. But what can be said is that it exists, and that's where we derive our first explanation of the material condition. So in the liberal institution, like, things ought to be a certain way. You have majors and courses and classes, vertical relationships established in this institution, which sets well for the workplace. So I think higher institution learning places churn workers more than anything else.
I definitely agree, and thank you for understanding what I was trying to say. I was trying to phrase it a bit different. I'm just like, you might figure it out. So thank you for being understanding about what I was saying.
Yeah, and the beautiful thing about communication is that the mouth, the words, and the thinking are all predicated and all compound from the past of the language. But what's true is that when people want to express themselves, which is just the jut of that expression, the exertion, the investment of that time and labor, intentionally and intelligibly, language is just no more than a filter for that expression. Tool making and doing a job and materializing labor is just filters for our expression, right? So we use the material condition in our immediacy to materialize our expressions, at which then become communicable or understood from the third perspective, or the perspective observing our expressions. So you were trying to throw down something, but I don't worry, we pick it up pretty good around here. Like, you want to say something, but you mean another thing. We know what you mean, because the saying part is just you trying, or just us trying to express ourselves. But when you have this level of understanding of the expression of the human individual, it's like, you can throw something down, but we pick it up. We know what you mean.
Cool. Can I ask my
Appreciate that.
question?
Yes, please.
Okay, so this is gonna sound okay. I know it's not silly, but like for some reason, like this is my first time being in these kinds of spaces, and like all my life, these kinds of spaces kind of make me feel, how do I say it nicely? Not as welcome. This is the first time I feel genuinely welcome, but how do I get rid of that automatic thought that you're not that useful, you're disabled, you can't do much? I really genuinely want to get rid of it. And it's just like I'm trying so hard, but it's just, I don't know how to explain it.
Lovely question. And I actually have an answer. Hopefully this will answer your question. But as I explain it, people compound the past, like all of their actions and all of the stuff that people have consumed, compound from the past to what makes the present. And so, which then sets up the structures for the future, because you can only have within your immediacy what you have done, what you have experienced in order to materialize what it is now to create stuff in the future. So if in the past, right, you've had this feeling of going into political spaces, not feeling welcomed, unfortunately, it will still linger because that is how the flow of time works in our expression. But what I can say is that when you enter these spaces, right, and usually from this is usually a dialectical understanding of the material condition. Most people are not well versed, and I'm not well versed at all, into every single thing, right? Everyone has an authority at which they places themselves in. And this what gives me a little bit of confidence speaking, right, on these subjects. And I'm no scholar whatsoever. But it comes from the understanding of the material condition. And in some cases, even so, I even put myself on a little high horse, how I know a little bit more. But that just helps me put on this little front. But having honest conversations like these, right, helps you compound right now, which one will then become the past, which will then create the present to make structures of the future. So even though you've had those experiences and where you feel like, you know, I don't feel welcomed, I feel like a critic or attacked or whatever, the feeling will still linger, but the lingering feeling won't have that effect. Once you start practicing, because I would say when people do stuff, shit happens for a reason. And that reason is what justifies your action. So you go into these spaces, right, feeling like that. And I'm glad that you found a space right here. And this is actually one of those first steps at which you can take forward to building that confidence, or at the very least, alleviating that feeling, is to have these open conversations, to speak out, right? Because we're all forever in our thoughts. We can all think of whatever we want. You know, I'm thinking of a bunch of stuff, and this will reinforce my perception of the world. But everything happens for a reason. And everything happens that is, you know, which will help you with your journey, is materialize it. So I can't believe I've been doing this for 3 months. Me? Or 2 months. I can't believe I've been doing this for every week for 2 months. I only missed 1 week. But it's the fact that you need to start doing it and start at the point that you're most comfortable with, right? So I'm glad that you're here, right? I'm glad that you're here voicing out your concerns, making yourself feel expressed, because that is how you feel out, not just the space around you, but yourself as well. And so it also goes hand in hand. You need to have someone who will reciprocate that feeling with you in order for you to validate and justify and, of course, build that confidence within yourself. So if there's one thing that I would like you to leave, right, this conversation is understanding that you have it within yourself already, right? It just may not seem like it, but it's that compounding of the past. Whatever actions you do now will become the past, will then help you build the structures of your future. Then it sounds, you know, it's easier said than done, but I do it incrementally, or just in small steps at first, which then helps build that structure. So I'm glad you're on your journey, right? I'm glad you're here. So don't stop asking questions, right? You can come on here every week as much as needed. You want to come over here, have conversations, and then turn that around to other political spaces who are a little bit, I would say, more ignorant in a sense. But don't be afraid, right? We have nothing to lose but our chains. And words, even though they sting, may hurt a little, are just a result of people's material conditions. That is what they think and what they, right, understand of the world, which is very different from how you understand the world. And so that separation, for me at least, helps me alleviate, it's not entirely my fault. It's just how people think of the world. So that helps me. I hope this answers your question. Keep asking them. Love that you're here.
Oh, thank you. And I really, really do appreciate that. It's just, man, it's like doing this from bed and like having a heating pad right now on my back. It's just like, you can't help but think, oh God, I can never do a rally, or oh God, you can't do this and that. But I'm grateful that I'm in a space that's like, no, you can do something. And so thank you for that. Much appreciated.
Oh yeah, and this thinks to me about takes me to a strike, right? When I say strike, hey, go out, general strike, do a strike. People think picket signs, quit your job, got to do all these crazy things, Mad Max, you know, it's all this like revolution type of, no, striking in the ways that you're trying to express yourself as well while you're, you know, laying on your back. It's just doing as much as you can. And this goes back to that quote, to each according to his ability, to each according to his need. You can only do as much as you can. And if anyone asks you more of what you can do, tell them fuck off. I tell people, like, you know, I can't do that. I know my abilities, and this comes from knowing what you can and cannot do, but it's also people respecting the fact that you can and cannot do some stuff. And that's their fault. That's their problem. If they can't recognize that you can't do stuff, that's not on you, right? It may hurt and feel like, oh, you should be something, but that's capitalism speaking. That's capitalism telling you you ought to do something. It's like capitalism like, yo, no, you have to do something because someone else is asking you. Nah, because we live in such a mode of production, right? We can only do as much as we can. If there's anything more, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do.
And I wanted to add to that about like feeling like you're in a safe space kind of thing, because I still have a problem with like enunciating and expressing myself, because like I grew up, I didn't say anything, I was just completely introverted, and then I went to conventions, and that quickly became I had to be outgoing and stuff, and so it was kind of awkward. So like sometimes you just, if you force yourself out into a situation you're not familiar with, that sometimes helps. It just becomes, it's just gaining experience in the real world. That's pretty much how I I'm able to talk as much as I do.
Okay, all right. That does make sense. Thank you. I think one of my first steps is definitely unlearning all the things that capitalism told me, oh no, you can't. But sometimes I guess 5 hours of my time is enough, and I have to respect that about myself.
Well, 5 hours. Oh yeah. Well, whatever hours you may do, like even a second worth of your investment of your time, it's intelligible, it's intentional, and you should be proud of what you do. Even if someone, because the what is it? It's like the death of joy is like comparison, or it's like comparison is like the death of something. But it's like when you compare yourself to others, it's, oh my god, you can pull out that quote, please. But it's like when you compare yourself to someone else, you're comparing yourself either at your best to someone who is also at their best, and it's like, oh, my best is not as good. But what only really matters is that you yourself are expressing yourself, you yourself are doing this. And so you can only thank who for the materializations of your efforts? You. And that is what you should be proud of. Yeah, that one. Death of joy. Happiness, why be happy when someone else is happier, Strange behavior. Strange thing that capitalism tells us, that you can't be happy unless you're working hard. But they never tell you what the working hard is. It's like, you must work hard. No, harder than that. No, you're not successful. Work harder than that. This is your fault. Oh my God. Scary. Oh, God forbid that I don't work hard enough. I work my ass off in some jobs. Oh, that's fine. I do the 1 hour for the episode for people who want to sit here, right? But if we're on time constraints, get out of here. And this is uploaded to YouTube. So those who don't have the time, they can still catch the content. But if those who have the time, catch it live. Thanks, Day. Peace. Get out of here. If you're new, be somewhere else. Cool. So it is always that past 20. So we'll be here next Wednesday. Don't know what the agenda will be for next Wednesday, but it'll be another banger. I think we'll talk about democracy next Wednesday. So recorded sessions. Thank you if you're watching. Next Wednesday, all that. Love you all. Peace and love. All power to the people. Hang out if you want. Talk to your fellow comrades, but we will be back next Wednesday. So thank you so much. Please take care, of course, and all that. Love you all. Bye-bye.